and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 793rd New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the immense pleasure and privilege today of being your MC for a conversation featuring Julie Chénot, Alex Marzano-Lesnevich, Cassandra Medley, Jenny Polak, and Amanda Millet-Sorsa. We're also thrilled to welcome poet Samira Negrouche here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land we are speaking from. And now to introduce today's guests and host. Julie Chénot joined the Camargo Foundation in January 2014, initially as program director. Following the separation of the Jerome and Camargo Foundations in September 2017, she was appointed executive director of the Camargo Foundation. Ms. Chénot was a Rockefeller Research Fellow at the Center of Folk Life and Cultural Heritage at the Smithsonian Institution. Alex Marzano-Lesnevich is the author of The Fact of a Body, A Murder and a Memoir, which received a Lambda Literary Award among many other recognitions and is in development with HBO. They have been the recipient of many prestigious fellowships, and they have written for publications including New York Times, among others. Their next book, Both and Neither, is forthcoming. Cassandra Medley is a playwright and teacher. Her recently produced plays include American Slavery Project and Cell, among others. Ms. Medley has been the recipient of many prestigious awards and teaches playwriting at Sarah Lawrence College. Jenny Polak makes site and community responsive art that amplifies the demand for social justice. Originally from England with a family history of migration, Polak makes public and socially engaged projects such as those that examine detention centers, the violence of borders, and strategies for surviving hostile authorities. Polak's work has been exhibited widely across the world, and she has received numerous fellowships and awards. And Amanda Millet-Sorsa is an artist, arts writer, and arts worker based in New York. She has exhibited at Below Grand Gallery, Socrates Sculpture Park, and elsewhere. She has received support and grants through the Materials for the Arts and NYC Cultural Affairs, among others. She is a member of the International Association of Art Critics, a curator at Below Grand, and we're also lucky to have her as a contributor to the Brooklyn Rail. And thanks to all of you for joining from across the world, across New York, and I'm so excited to pass it over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you everyone for being here. We're so lucky to be here at the Camargo Foundation in Cassis, France, and I'm here with Julie and Alex, and we have Cassandra and Jenny who are in New York, and Samira in Algiers. And so we're here to talk about this foundation, which is located right by the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see from the images. And residents are invited to come and stay here up to 2 months to work on current projects. And they are given these live-work apartments. There is, here we see the open air theater that is based on the Delphi Theater in Greece. There's a music room with a harpsichord and a piano, the library that we're currently in. And it's exciting to see all the different projects that have been going on here. And so Eleanor, if you could see some of the other images, please. And so here we can see the sea and the different residents coming together. There are up to 15 at any time. And so part of this discussion here today is to talk a little about the kinds of proposals that have been worked on while here, and also the spirit of experimentation, which was largely what Jerome Hill, the founder, was very invested in. And the property was bought in 1930 by Jerome Hill, who was an artist. He was a painter, a musician, and a filmmaker. And he came from a very wealthy family in Minnesota that was one of the first founders of the railroads. And when he came to Cassis, France, as a gay man from the Midwest, he found his freedom personally and artistically in France, and then settled here after the war at this property that he bought here, and made it into this place where artists could come together to create work and experiment. And so in the beginning, we had, in his passing in 1972, a lot of residents that came here to do scholarly and think and studying work that was related to Francophone studies. And then with time, more artists were invited, and then eventually there was more of an international opening. Before, it was a lot more Anglophone and Anglo-Saxon based people in regions of the world. And Julie will speak more to that in a minute. But back to Jerome Hill, who was also a big supporter of the arts. He was especially influenced by filmmakers and had a long-standing relationship with Jonas Mekas, and was also one of the people who helped support the creation of the anthology film archives. In his passing in 1972, when the Camargo Foundation began, he also gave Jonas Mekas an island in the Caribbean, which Jonas Mekas then sold, and with those funds used to create, to really buy the building that is Anthology Film Archives, still standing today in New York. And so Eleanor, if you could get a little taste of Jerome's experimental film, we can kind of delve into what that world was like for him. And we will see that some of the techniques that he used involved painting on film, a lot of images that superimpose on one another. And he used the backdrops of the Mediterranean here a lot in his paintings and films.
Through cinema, time is annihilated.
Thank you, Eleanor. And so this experimental film was a big part of Jerome Hill's life. And he also supported a lot of that community. And without him, that community probably couldn't have achieved as much as they did. And so when the foundation was created, it was supposed to host that spirit of experimentation for all the artists that would come here and the scholars and thinkers as a result to honor his legacy. So when Julie came in 2014 and took her executive directorship, there was an expansion in terms of the kinds of residents that were invited to spend time here. And perhaps you could speak about why you initiated some of those changes.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. Organizing this program and hosting it is really great to have it and to be all together. Yes, before I arrived, there was only one program called Camargo Fellowship, and it was mainly for scholars in French and Francophone humanities, and it was for writers, visual artists, and composers. And due to the financial crisis, there had been the programs that stopped during 3 years, from 2011 to 2014. So when I was hired to relaunch the programs, the board that hired me told me, we want to experiment. We want to take a 3-year experimentation to see what makes sense and how to best answer to the needs of artists, scholars, and thinkers, and to open it up at regional level and make it much more international. So that's what the board hired me for, and they said, yeah, let's try and see, and then we'll see how to move on and how to go on. So among different things I've done when I arrived with the board was really to say, okay, we want to have it not only for French and Francophone, for the scholars, not only for French and Francophone studies, but also to open it up to the Mediterranean. What you see is the Mediterranean Sea. So it made sense to make it broader, to open it up to the entire Mediterranean studies. Also for the artists, instead of staying with composer, visual artists, and writers only, to say, let's make it not discipline focused, but let's open it up to all artistic disciplines. And also let's open it to thinkers, which is quite a vague concept, I can admit, but that was really the idea, is to make it also for independent scholars, for curators, for critics, for I don't know, philosophers. So that was one thing. The other thing was very much so the discipline, the geography, to open it up to, it was more Anglo-Saxon, to say, okay, the English will remain the language we use for exchanges on site. However, we want to have it much more international, to really bring people from the different continents to be here on site in the different programs we organize, and also to recognize that the needs of artists, scholars, and thinkers might be different, depending on who they are, depending on the period of their work, where they are, depending on whether they are working alone or working with other person as a small collective. So to be able to propose different ways to welcome artists, scholars, and thinkers here, and support experimentation. So
I was just going to say that seems to be an important flexibility that a foundation has, to be able to change and to kind of reassess the direction that it's going in order to be more inclusive and more expansive. And so I was curious to know, when Jerome Hill came to France in the 20th century, he fell in love with the France of the 20th century. And so how is it that residents, when they come here in the 21st century in France, how does that kind of affect the kind of proposals that make sense today in relation to the Mediterranean and the region?
Yeah, I mean, what Jerome Hill, the first time he came to Cassis was in the 30s. The Cassis of then and the Europe and the world of then is widely different from what is today. I mean, it was a period before the Second War. It was with colonies. It was not so much connected. We are today in a totally different period, and the questions are very different. So and I'm looking out at the window. Well, sorry, we have a view on the Mediterranean from our window. So it's looking at the Mediterranean today is, yeah, this is a view we have. Looking at the Mediterranean today, it's not the same than looking at the Mediterranean 50 or 60 or 70 years ago. We don't see it the same way. Today is a question of this place is a place where, again, it's the exchanges of and circulation or non-circulation of people, ideas, is very intense. So I think it's impossible to be facing this view, this horizon, and not question oneself on what is the Mediterranean. And I'm not saying that we are bringing answers. I'm saying more we are raising questions. And I think it's more a place for experimentation and questioning and raising different perspectives rather than providing answers.
And so on the topic of experimentation, why do you think it's important to provide a place for experimentation? And what have you learned from the residents who have come here and engaged in that way?
I think we are, I mean, experimentation is just a go. We need experimentation. We need to find new perspective. We need to experiment. We need to try new things. And above all, for a place for art. So that's just obvious that we need that. I think the good thing, what Camargo is providing is what a lot of residencies are providing, of course, but specifically Camargo is providing something specific. It was developed and conceived by Jerome for Jerome and for other artists. So it's really conceived as a place for avant-garde, for people to meet, to be together, to share time together, to be on one's own, and be also presenting as the theater. I think this is something that is very specific to the site. It's very present on the campus, and it's still something we are encouraging a lot, not only so for one person to have some time to be away from daily life, to be to have the capacity, and you will see it with Alex, to have the capacity to dive into one's work, also to have the capacity to be here with other person from other disciplines, from other countries, from having other processes, to be able to exchange, discuss, meet, and also to be able to be in a safe place where it's possible to fail and to experiment again and try it again. And we have no expectation. We don't, it's very open-ended. We have no expectation that people will need to produce or present anything at the end of the 2-3 months here.
Yeah, that's a wonderful gift. And so Alex, you are a resident here, and you've been here for a couple weeks now, and I think you're enjoying the last few weeks of your residency and working on your new book. What does experimentation look like for you in your art form?
Well, I think you can see it on the image on the screen right now. The very first thing that I did when I got here was look at the water a lot, look at the water so much, and start to get to know the other residents, all of whom are working on such different things, and yet we quickly started to discover cross currents of our work. But then what happened suddenly in this room, where I took the art, with all respect to Jerome Hill, I took his paintings down and I printed out the manuscript, cut thousands of words in the printing, like realized quickly, cut it up, suddenly could see what belonged there and what didn't, and then just started trying to find a new shape for all this material. I'm working with hundreds of years, many lives, including my own. I'm living with ghosts all the time. I really truly feel like I'm living in the center of the book. But you see that shape, there's like a triangle on the bottom right. And that came a couple of days in, and I was just like, oh no, that's the shape of the book. Like at the beginning, you can experience one moment without understanding that many layers of sedimentary history lie underneath it. And by the end of the book, I want the narrative to have the feel of all that history accumulated, which I don't think I would have been able to articulate until I was like literally living in it. I don't have this kind of space at home to do this to my walls. Who does? And I don't have the space in my days to live in constant communion and relationship with these ghosts.
Right.
So it's quite intense and beautiful to like go through the rhythms of my day, from like the first cup of coffee, which I always have on the balcony, like looking at the water, to, you know, taking an evening glass of wine out there. I'm constantly walking past Yeah, that's my
That's the
balcony.
view from your studio, yeah. And so take us into your
That's a lot in there.
process a little bit more. You know, what
Yeah.
you said you have coffee in the morning from your balcony, but what is your writer's process like when you're here? You've got this time and space, and you're in France. You
Yeah,
know,
no.
what is it doing to your work?
Truthfully, I think a lot of it that it's doing to the work is, and you see the accumulation of books there. I've also just been like slamming books into my face, reading a ton. What it's doing to the work, all about looking at the water, right? Water exists on a different time frame than we do. And in a way, the historical currents I'm working on in the book exist in a different time frame than we do. So I'm transgender, I live in the United States. I'm here during a time of just intense, sustained, horrific attacks on trans lives and trans rights in the US, trying to make a book that's about hope, and that's about hope in transgender history. At the same time as like I'm watching in this extremely acute contemporary political moment, hope being something that's very hard to access. So in a way, I'm trying to tap into like this longer arc of history, but also this longer arc of identity and emotion that says that the past speaks to the present speaks to the future. I'm working with ghosts, but we will become the ghosts of the future. And like, what is this that I'm trying to just tap into something larger? And it can be very difficult to do that when you're caught up in the rhythms of life at home. It's a lot easier to do that with the gift of extraordinary time, extraordinary space, and constantly looking at the water and this cliff that you saw earlier, this mountain shape that I spend so much time looking at. Yes, exactly that goes through different kinds of light and different seasons of its own throughout the day. It just looks so different at different points in the day, but it always goes through this cycle. And I think that's helped ground me in the work and in the thinking.
And has being here in this specific part of France influenced your thinking or how you're immersing into the work differently than if you were back home?
Oh, certainly. Because, in fact, I had a conversation with someone in Marseille who was like, well, the US is responsible for like all of France's thinking about gender. And I was like, actually, really not, like, I'm working with so many files of transgender folks who existed in France long ago. Like France has a different relationship to gender than the US does. I'm trying to think about different cultures and different holdings of gender and the way gender is something we sort of author individually and author culturally. And that's harder to do when you're in a setting that feels very singular, as the US sometimes does, and like very insistent on its own simultaneous singularity and universality. It's much easier to do when you're in a place that A, is not your own, and B, where you're talking to folks from all over all the time. Yeah.
And so what have you found in your findings
But,
about gender and France and
there's so many interesting stories.
perhaps you could share one.
I think Violette Morris is someone. I mean, I'm writing about Claude Cahun, who people know their work. But I didn't put Violette Morris into the book because I didn't want to. It felt distracting. But they are interesting. They are someone who was an athlete for France. They dressed and largely lived, presented as a man, although the language differed at various points. But they were a race car driver, a javelin thrower. They were a giant Olympic athlete. They were the most awarded athlete in France in their time period. They got top surgery by saying that their chest was getting in the way of reaching the race car wheel. And then they were stripped of their ability to compete for France because their wearing of pants was seen as terrible and disrespectful. And they turned into a huge Nazi sympathizer. They became a spy for the Nazis. They became horrible. They were known as the hyena of the Gestapo. And they were executed in a hail of bullets by the French resistance. So I think their life is a really interesting question of like, what do you do with go to a podcast? What do you do with the bad gays? Like, what do you do with, how do you fight for the rights of any group of people and also acknowledge that humans are complicated? And so that's one example.
That's a great example.
I think they're an interesting part of history.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting us into your process as a writer and also how the landscape has influenced, your research into writing this book, and also giving you the time and space to do that. From here, we'll go to a different artist, Jenny Polak, who came to the residency in 2017 with artist Dred Scott, and will be coming again in 2023. And so, Jenny, you came here to do, basically with a mindset of research. You delved into the archives to find documents and visuals about the slave trade in Marseille. Could you give us an insight into what that process was like for you to come here and do that research, and why couldn't you do this at home?
Well, it was a wonderful experience, and thank you for having me here. It's nice to recap these things. Dred and I are two separate artists, but we also collaborate from time to time. And at the time, it was 2017, we had been following pretty horrendous things that were happening around the Mediterranean because of the migration crisis. At the time, the main focus was the Syrian migration crisis, and we saw this partly as an opportunity to get closer to what was happening in the rest of the world, and get a different perspective on the work we had been doing in America. But we had quickly realized that there was a very interesting kind of intersection of stories that we each were interested in Marseille and in France in general. So we decided we would do something we do not normally do, but which was to look into archives in Marseille and see what we could learn about the legacy of the slave trade in France, and also the kind of history of migration around the Mediterranean. Initially, we thought that we would hang our ideas around the idea of passports, early passports which were being printed and used in Marseille for a lot of people, a lot of movement between different empires and different states and so on around the Mediterranean, which we did. But as we were doing that, we began to follow up on a tiny bit of research we had done before we came to Camargo, which had shown us that there was an interesting family, trading family in Marseille called the family of Régis. And we had decided we would go looking for some evidence of this family, which nobody could seem to know anything about as far as we could make out in Camargo. So we were kind of warned off even trying to look for them. But in fact, it was it proved a very rich scheme of inquiry, because this dynasty of traders in Marseille had been involved in all sorts of aspects of the triangular trade, and providing financial support for slave trade, and also dealing with all sorts of goods and services, and then subsequently really making sure that the main country that they ended up operating in, which was what is now Benin, became a French colony. So they dealt with the French authorities and the church, and brought in people to kind of run the country at the very beginning of the colonial era. Anyway, so we did find these things, and we rather, as you've just seen, we had all sorts of photocopies and printouts pinned all over the wall of our room, and trying to connect the dots, and also lots and lots of images of migrants in the Mediterranean and so on. So, yeah.
Could you describe, or could you let us know from the visuals here what it is that you found? Was it documents, or what was it that you were kind of looking for in this search? Was it images or, yeah?
Yeah, we were looking for documents, but we're not historians, and what we were really, I suppose, looking for were visuals of documents that would help us to tell the stories that we were learning about, so we actually photographed the documents. We went into several different archives in Marseille and the Balthazar Library, which has an amazing collection, and got people to pull things out for us, and then we spent days photographing them. This image, for instance, which was one of the resulting prints that we made afterwards, a couple of years in this case afterwards, includes a photograph from a set of glass plates that we were shown by this Provençal photographer, Eugène Isnardon, and he had kind of followed the emerging colonization that France was doing around Africa, as well as photographed tourists in Provence, which was a big emerging thing at the time. He was operating at the very end of the 19th century. And so we were allowed to have scans of these beautiful glass plates photographs, and we decided to include this one. And this is a large lithograph that we in fact ended up making in a litho studio in Paris. And what you see in the lower half are drawings of slave ships and from the history of France. And in the upper half are the plains that we learned are the most, in fact, even though we hear all the time about the horrors of people dying in the Mediterranean, the kind of standard migrant labor traffic that's going on between the post-colonial countries in Africa, going back and forth into Europe, is happening by plane, including the deportations back to Mali and Sierra Leone and places.
So from the research that you and Dred were able to do in these libraries and archives in Marseille, you were then able to use that material to create these lithographs later.
Yes.
So,
yeah, exactly.
and so how did this process contribute to an expansion in your work? Or how do you view experimentation, in a project like this?
Yeah, it felt like very new territory for us to kind of we are a couple, so we have a lot of exchange. That's not new for us, a lot of constant debate and dialogue about the work that we're doing, but to try to kind of bring these Dred's long-standing interest in African diaspora and in the legacies of slavery, and mine in migration politics, to bring them together and figure out how we could knit some of this into some visual art was very new for us. And we also we tried setting up photographs. This particular print uses a photograph that we staged in the bay just outside of Camargo, for example, the beach. We staged it there with some of the other other people who were in residence. So we were trying out some different strategies for building the images that we wanted to make. And we had not really done that kind of archival research before, so that was a big experiment for us as well.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And you are coming back to work with another scholar soon.
Yes, we're really grateful for that. Thank you. Because a lot of what we began by working on when we went to make the imagery was very much to do with the past, the part of our story that deals with the past of and the profiting from enslavement in France. But we wanted very much to tell something very real and contemporary about migration and how it stands on some of this past of theft of people and theft of resources from Africa. And Clara Lecade, who we had met, who is a scholar in Paris, works specifically on the present day organizing of migrant laborers, particularly those who have been deported, and how they work to influence the overall politics of migrant labor and how that works between France and Africa. I should say that the Régie, our biggest reveal at the end of our residency in 2017 was that we suddenly realized, having been looking for documents about, and actually we started to look for traces in the streets and the street names and so on, and didn't find anything about the family Régie. And then all of a sudden we realized that there was a chateau just not far from Camargo that they built with their profits. And so we were able to go visit and go photograph the chateau. And one of the prints you'll see here, if you go forward rather than back, you'll see one of the prints is in fact, uses that image, 17, that one. This is the Chateau Régie, which we managed to find, and we incorporated into this very large block print and pigment print that we worked on with students at Stony Brook in the print studio there. So yeah.
No, go ahead. So I was gonna say that, so Camargo has different kinds of programs and fellowships that artists can receive and scholars. And so you have been a recipient of what is called the long-term accompaniment, which is allowing you to return to Camargo this year to continue working on the first seeds of this project. Could you speak about what it kind of opened up for you to come back and what you'll be doing while you're here?
Oh, yes. We actually are hoping to connect with some of the organizers that Clara works with in Mali. And we're going to try and plan some quite performative events in Marseille, where we will present a platform for some of the organizers to speak about their work in Mali, but we want to use the art framework in a way to bring these people who are organizers, but they are former deportees as well, back to France. We like the idea of the art actually having this kind of functional undermining of the authorities in a sense. And so we're hoping to plan that, and also to bring together the work that we've been making, which has been shown here and there, but we'd like to bring it together in one show in Marseille. But yeah, we have a lot of learning to do and talking, and we're going to arrange some meetings with Clara's contacts in Africa.
Okay.
So Jenny, Dred, and Clara will actually come first in fall this year, and then next year again. So it gave more leeway to prepare what Jenny is talking about.
Okay. Maybe you
Yes.
could talk a bit more about the different programs that Camargo has, since there's so many that cater to different groups.
Yeah, it was really the idea initially when I arrived. There was only one type of program. It was also this Camargo Fellowship, in which Alex is part of. It's really like now it's 10 weeks residency, and people all arrive together. They're from different background, different countries, and it's really open-ended. It's really time and space open-ended, no obligation at all to present anything or produce anything. It's really like very much about meeting transdisciplinary and letting it to serendipity. But I was very much also interested in working on connection between artists and scholars, and to provide a space for artists and scholars to work together, but so to duos. And I know it's very much about based on human connections. So I'm not going to do the arranged weddings, so people are applying together. And this is what Jenny and Red and Clara that's all they come back as part of a program we have for artists and scholars to come back together as a collaborative team. We have also, and Cassandra came through this type of program. We have 12 apartments on site, and I wanted to be able to use the entire campus to be working with a curator and invite a guest, thinker and intellectual to work with on a subject, on a question that is of today or of tomorrow. That is very important. So, and to have then do an open call and have a thematic call on that specific subject, and so then select 8 artists from different countries to work together and be together here for 5. In that case, it was 5 weeks, and then not only to work for their own project, but also to exchange on that question. The program Cassandra was in was about African diaspora, and Cassandra will talk about it, so I'm not gonna talk more about that. And the last type of programs we have is really to recognize that to experiment and to be able to do something new usually takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So to be able to accompany one person over an extended period of time, and to be there, not only Camargo, but also to be able to bring around the table other organizations and other people, like more the ecosystem of the artist or the scholar or the thinker or the team, and accompany the process over a few years. Because I think we need more time. We are just always rushed into project dynamics that are too short, and it's no way to step aside and really think and have new perspective.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful that there are so many different ways to support the residents here. And so now we could hear about Cassandra's experience, who was a resident here in 2022, writing new one-act plays following suit. Her piece called Cell, which was written in 2012, and which speaks about the interactions and moral dilemmas that people of color from working class families experience as a result of the immigration and migration detainees and detention centers in the United States. And so you'll have the pleasure of hearing an extract of the play Cell. Eleanor, if you could please have us listen.
And there's a lens watching us, and them breathe, swallow, watching us on the cam.
Hold up. Leon told me Gwen is doing a terrific
Sure,
job.
till he caught sight of her on the camera, sneaking a chat with cell 293, that Haitian woman. She's holding her baby up to the bars on her cell so Gwen here can pat the baby's head. Yep. You know the one we had to put in isolation? We got a close-up of Gwen here. Tell her, Gwen.
Her name's Marie-Louise.
It's not your job to know what her name is.
I was just saying hi.
You was stroking that Creole woman's baby's head. Tell her. And the Mexican? Gwen here is sharing her curry chicken leftovers with the Mexican. We got it on live on camera.
Daughter, you know that's way against regulations.
The baby may have a fever.
Doctor comes the second Friday of every month. She's been given a cold compress. Meanwhile, only reason she gonna get one more chance is cause Leon thinks you got a sweet behind. Otherwise, he'd have kicked you out this afternoon. He's got his own supervisor.
Me and Marie the same age, but she got a baby she gotta keep in jail.
When your new friend is put on the plane back to Haiti, guess you wanna go to the shanties too? Or with your Mexican back to the filthy hovels down there? See how well you enjoy it?
Okay. No need to be so rough. She won't do it no more. No need to climb the walls about it.
Word for me, you two wouldn't have no walls.
What you want?
Thank you, Eleanor. And so, Cassandra, when you were a resident here at Camargo, during this program, how did you being here affect and influence how you thought about the migration crisis when you were writing your work?
Well, first of all, I want to tell Alex. Alex,
Yes, hi.
I envy you. And I was in the studio below yours,
Oh, fabulous.
staring out at the water. And it was that water. You write these descriptions of what you're going to do, you know, and I didn't know the place I'd be at or be in. And it was staring at that water day after day, night after night. And where the studio is situated architecturally is where the wharf, the Cassis, the fishing village, has now this fancy wharf, and you see the tourists on the wharf, and you see these luxury yachts coming in and going out from their outings and so on, and knowing that across that horizon were these other boats, these leaky boats, desperately entering the Mediterranean Sea. And I found that such an inspiration for my project. Also, it was my experience at Camargo was so life transformative because I was provided with the opportunity to form relationships, 5-week relationships, connections with artists from the African diaspora. And as someone who have had the great fortune to be at many residencies, but for the first time in my 30 years of going to residencies, we were all having a good time there. I was with African descendant and African people as a group, as a social group, as a support group, sharing work, and entering into daily amazing conversations of information. So as an American, Midwest, Detroit, born and bred, here I had the opportunity to really talk with other people about their lives and their form of colonization, their forms of legacy. I had a wonderful, one of my friends, a wonderful gay actor playwright, and to talk with him from Zimbabwe, the Chénot people. And he has memory of relatives who had a whole other aspect, point of view about being gay, being lesbian, because pre-colonialization, the Chénot people's idea of gender was quite non-binary. And just this information, and I received so much information about from the Afro-French, who I got to know people. We had scholars come and visit, and we had long conversations and so on. And this notion of France being so supposedly racially advanced compared to the United States. These various notions, learning more about Somalia from someone who's struggling and working in Somalia. Brazil, wonderful. And it was so informative that the artist from Brazil and his partner, they have no slave records. What I mean is they are from forced migration. But because of the plantation system in Brazil, their legacy is one of no records as to their ancestors, whereas my legacy is from Virginia planters who kept very meticulous slave records. And I can trace my ancestors back name by name, all kinds of amazing discussions and the information and the inspiration. And the great gift, I've been in many, many residencies. We were so fortunate. There was not one of us whom we had any difficulty with in terms of personality. We were all together as a group, constantly learning. And it was fascinating for me. I was the elder. I happened to be the elder in this group. And I received such respect that was cultural, that was not North American. And so every day was just amazing, staring out at that sea. My play took off because I was receiving perspectives that I had never anticipated. And I'm very fascinated with the people of color who work in those centers. The brown people, the Black people who jail the brown and the Black people. And so I had a paradise experience for 5 weeks. We loved going out together, hanging out together after working, and so much information I met a scholar who is Afro-French writer. She works out of Paris. And when she was telling me how, when I would say, I love Paris, I always loved to visit Paris, and to receive her ambivalence as someone who was, as an Afro-French person, born in Paris, raised in Paris. And she said to me, I had to go to New York and live in New York before I came to appreciate Paris. And learning about her experiences, and there were other Afro-French scholars talking about their admiration for African Americans because we had something to fight in front of our faces, something to protest in front of our faces, whereas in their description of their experience, how their culture, their French culture, likes to cover over. We're all, fraternité, likes to cover over the actual struggles. As one person said to me, yeah, liberté, except for when you want to rent an apartment. or receive a certain job. So I was just full every single day, and loving to have the surprise. Who will I run into? We'd all go to the market on market day together and so on. It changed. It was a transformative experience. And I am so, so grateful. We're still in touch, still working together, still keeping in touch with each other. And in fact, there's going to be a presentation of 2 of the plays written there, one by Tandere, who is, I can't point it out, but he's second to the right. He and I are going to present our plays in Minneapolis at the Jerome Hill Foundation. So luck, 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 fortune, abundance, and gratitude.
Thank you, Cassandra. That was very inspiring. Maybe this would be a good time to perhaps see the video of your piece that you were working on.
Well, let me explain. We were asked to do a presentation for anyone interested in the village, for a bilingual audience. And so this was an excerpt of the play that I am transforming at this very moment. And I was one of the performers, and then a fellow artist, wonderful artist, was the other performer. And I am just blanking because I'm blanking on her name, Rashida. Yeah, Rashida, who is actually from the States. And so in the excerpt, I was playing what I was inspired by because of where my studio was. I wrote a monologue that confronted the audience directly, confronted them as citizens of Cassis, as citizens who questioning their awareness of the other boats in the Mediterranean and the other people who have no passports trying to get across. So I wrote this monologue and we performed it. People were quite, somber when I would look in their faces. I was told by the director to really directly confront them. And then there's another character who is one of the migrants on those boats. So that's what this is. And I don't know if it will really, I don't know, Eleanor, if it will. This is at the end of it anyway. Oh yeah. So that's me. And then
Strangers grip me, strangers pull me up into their dry boat. I am screaming, weeping, screaming at the waves. Where's my baby? Where's my baby? Strangers, their boat's heavy with fish. They pulled me out. I end up in this place. What is this place? It's too much, it's too much, it's too many of them coming.
yeah, someone said there is the sound of the doves in the background. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, maybe it's a good time to maybe ask some questions from the audience. Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Alex, and for participating, and Julie.
Thank you so, so much, Cassandra and Julie and Alex and Amanda. This has been so amazing. And Jenny, thank you so much. It's been so incredible to hear about your experiences at Camargo and the inspiration and all that it's, generated for you all. So thank you. We do have a few questions from the audience. I will ask one on behalf of Hong Zhang. Hong asked about the studio space for visual artists. They're interested in the what it looks like, if there are pictures, or maybe you can share a link or describe kind of what that setup is like?
So, yeah, the visual artist studio is actually the visual artist studio from the person who built one of the building at the beginning of the 20th century, an English painter called Mage Oliver. So it's, I think it's, I would say in square meters, it's like something like 20 square meters room. And there is also a dark room next to it, attached to it for photo. On our website, there are some pictures of the place, and I'm happy to send any pictures. What one has to know is that Camargo is very much for research process. It's less for production. So the idea is that it's, for example, we're not trying to answer all the needs of all visual artists or all artists and scholars that might be coming for production, but it's much more for research, initial phases, experimentation, rather than producing end products here.
Yeah.
But this visual artist studio is on the seaside, is a beautiful space. We have also another small cabin just above the sea that we use for artists. We have a composer house with a studio on the upper floor with a piano and harpsichord, different equipment there, with view on the sea, but also I think quite unique, the possibility to be playing day and night whenever one composer wants, and as loud as possible. And this library is, of course, open 24 hours a day. Whenever one wants to come, just can open and work.
Sounds amazing. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Hong, for that question. I would like to ask a question to you all, and I also encourage anybody else in the audience, if there's anything you want to ask, please feel free to raise your hand or send a message in the chat. But I am curious, I guess this question is for Julie. What are some plans, if you're able to share anything that you're thinking of for the future of the foundation, or what is your vision?
My vision is really to be able to continue support artists, scholars, and thinkers work more on continue working on transdisciplinary work. But currently, what we want is probably to be able to continue working on extended period of time with the person we are our fellows, and accompany them as long as possible, because it's really because this experimentation and this needs more time, and provide them also more financial support, because if we're talking about experimentation, people need to be able to financially also support themselves. So that one thing to be also, we are international. I still think we are not enough international, because I think it's super important to be able to cross, to be with other people we don't have in our daily life we might not meet. And for me is to keep within the organization. The experimentation should not be only for the resident we host, it's also for us, the organization, to keep it in as part of our DNA. So to be able to revisit what we are doing regularly and to question ourselves and to keep some space for experimentation on daily basis. So for example, also to be able to welcome people, artists that might need it. For example, because of questioning of exile, we had someone, of course, following the war in Ukraine, we had both a writer from Ukraine coming earlier this year, and Alex was here a couple of months ago when you arrived. We had someone also from Memorial, the Russian NGO, that had to come to France to go away from Russia, and to welcome also a person like that on site. So it's, yeah, different. But the idea to go on us also experimenting with the organization is super important, because the needs of scholars and artists and thinkers are changing all the time, and the worldwide situation is also changing all the time, evolving.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Julie. We have a question from Chloe now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation. Julie, you mentioned this, and I'm wondering if the artists and current and past residents of the program might want to speak to it. The merits of getting lost. When you're in residency, there's time to make errors, time to pursue the wrong information before finding the right information. And I would love to hear any stories you have about that process and having that time. That's my question.
I would say I've devoted an entire wall of the apartment to getting lost. It has just sections of writing that I'm not sure what I'm doing with them. I'm not sure where they're going. From that so far, I actually am leaving with, I will be leaving with, so far at least, 2 whole essay drafts that just like did not exist. I had no idea about. I hadn't written a word of before coming here. Didn't know I was working on, and I'm already thinking one of them may turn into book 3. So where's some wood? I'm gonna knock on it. So yeah, I think one of the benefits of getting lost is just like discovering, well, first of all, failure is productive, and it lets us question what failure even is. And when an idea doesn't work out, I think it still subterraneously lives somewhere. I know in my first book, there's actually a 1.5-page section that I plucked from an abandoned essay draft written 4 years prior and fit in perfectly. Like the voice was exactly perfectly for that section. I had made no edits. And it was almost as though some part of me was dreaming this book before I even understood that. And I don't think that happens without getting lost. You can't discover any new path without getting lost. Also, I spent a lot of time getting lost in Cassis, which is great. Just going for runs and not knowing where you are is actually really beautiful. The ocean's always there.
Yes, I thank you, Alex. I took walks and walks along the cliffs, and it really helps me to think out of this narrow structure that I might be falling into. Or also, and I like what Alex said, failure is productive. And what was helpful was to talk about failure with other residents and to hear their processes and their journeys. But taking those walks, because those are some hills, boy, those are some that whole town. It was very, very inspiring and productive.
Yes, I second that about the walks. We actually were in residence with a wonderful artist, Regin Igloria, for whom walking is part of his art practice. And we teamed up with Regin for some amazing walks in the Calanque, which is the national park beside Cassis. And we had some adventures together. But he was actually taking very long walks between Cassis and Marseille, and making his drawings in between. So yeah, we also benefited a lot from kind of exploring what the other people were doing who were in residence. Another person was a ceramicist, Anna Metcalf, who was exploring getting soil and clay from the cliff across the, walking around the bay to the nearest place where there was clay naturally occurring, and trying out things with that. All of these things were very inspiring, I found, as well.
All incredible answers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. That was such a great question, and thanks for those answers. Super inspiring. I see Babs Reingold's raising her hand, so you should be able to ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again. This was so wonderful to learn about the Jerome Foundation, and thank you to all the presenters. I visited Cassis a long time ago, and it's such an incredible place. And I can only imagine that it would be inspiring for anybody that was there. This is and I also love the whole concept of the Jerome Foundation, what you're trying to achieve with these artist residencies. But I have a specific question to Cassandra. I was fascinated by your discussion of the other, the African artists that were there and their interpretation or their own feelings about what it was like as far as acceptance. And then, of course, our own feeling your own feeling rather in America and what it means for acceptance. And I was wondering, after your conversations and interactions with them, do you think that you changed any of their perceptions of what life is like as an African American?
I think that perhaps I can't be totally sure. We all learned so much. We learned that the idea we've been taught, which is so profoundly Eurocentric, and we learned how we have our separate cultures and collectively fight that and struggle with that. I had no idea of what goes on in Brazil, for example. The steady brutality that goes in Brazil. And as I said, I had no idea that the slave records, you were just worked to death, period. That's it. It was just a different system and the effects on that system on all of us. I was so kind of overwhelmed with learning to the degree to which African Americans are admired. This idea that we fought, we've kept fighting, we keep protesting openly and all of this. I was quite taken with that. And I saw that the music, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And to really experience how that music that I came from is everywhere was quite something. Plus that these kids, these kids from the Bronx have created a world cultural music. These Black Latin kids, so I was influenced by it. It did change me. And I think I think our conversations did change them as well.
Thank you for that question, Babs. That was amazing. And thank you, Cassandra, for the super generous answer. This has been so incredible. I'm super grateful. And our last question today will come from Vong.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Cassandra, Julie, Jenny, and also Amanda here. And I was listening to what you were saying there, Cassandra. I can't help but to think of course, the controversial book when Foucault published it in 1961, I believe, Madness and Civilization, where he traced the 3 stages of cultural, evolution. And in the Renaissance, when people who now consider insane or mad people were part of the society. Not until the classical era, which is based on 17th century and then turned into modern era, which based on 18th century, the reason when you say European centric, exactly that what was when describing trans people or mad people, they were integrated from early culture. Even when I was growing up in Vietnam, being a Buddhist, those people were there and there was we didn't judge them. They were part of our cultural whole. now getting back to the great Jerome Hill, because I never, of course, he died so early on, so never got to know him, of course, but of course, I heard so much about him through my late friend Jonas Makers. And one of the great things about, I'm sure they share deep in common, was the commitment, exactly what you say, the word experiment. Experiment and failure. Failure is something that we do best, creative people. You can't imagine a business person who have an idea of a product he or she trying to create or invest, and you imagine it fail, he or she wouldn't repeat it. Same thing apply for a politician, wouldn't it? Having some kind of political agenda trying to earn the vote. If that fail, surely that would not be repeated. But when artists fail, we grow from it. It's so great. And one thing that I want to mention is that Jonas' great manifesto, anti-100-year cinema manifesto, in which he say, I memorize it because it's so great. He say, I want to celebrate the small forms of cinema, the lyrical form, the poem, the watercolor, sketch, portrait, arabesque, bagatelle. In the times when everybody wants to succeed and sell, I want to celebrate those who embrace social and daily failure to pursue the invisible, the personal things that bring no money, no bread, and make no contemporary history, art history, or any other history. I'm for art in which we do for each other as friends. Isn't that beautiful?
Mm-hmm.
So what's my question? I forgot now. My question is this, Julie. Was there a will in that Jerome left beside? I know that he left the island, which Jonas sold, and with that money, he bought Anthology. Used to be the courthouse, by the way. So was there a written will, and how much from the early years? Because I know when Jonas started in 50, was it 54, Film Culture magazine? For the first 3 years, he owned the printer, a lot of money. And whether Jerome had something to do rescuing Jonas when he was threatened to put in jail, which he had been in jail a few times. Was there any record of how he became involved in supporting Jonas with Film Culture magazine? Do you remember?
We don't have the records here. I think they are in Jerome Hill's paper in the Minnesota Historical Society. So all those documents, all the archives have been hosted, like conserved there, so they can, and most of them are digitalized, so it's possible to access them. So I think this part of the story of Jerome Hill and Jonas make us better than I do, I guess. What I know is they were very, very, very close. I think Jerome Hill really thought that the work of Jonas was just incredible. Jonas came here, all the pictures from Cassie, filmed from what is by now Camargo. He has done like Not for Jerome's and different films here, which are just beautiful. I think really inspired also the work of Jerome. So yeah, it was a source of inspiration, and for us, for me, very much when I've been constantly rethinking what to do, what makes sense to do here. It's always going back to what Jerome or Jerome Hill conceived this space really by him and I would say by not only him as a person, but him as an artist and with group of artists he was working with, and for being together and for experimenting. I mean, the site is very humble and very done with vernacular architecture material, natural material, which makes it it's just today still very, very, feel very comfortable and very nice to be in, and just facing this place, this horizon in this Mediterranean. I think it's that even after 9 years here and living on site, I'm still always every day surprised by how well conceived it was, and how contemporary it is still. I think that's really very much the spirit that they had back then.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I just admire the idea that across right on north of Marseille is Normandy, born another great Frenchman who would really understand America quite well, namely Alex de Tocqueville. And when he was here for 8 months, and he wrote that 2 essential volume, Democracy in America, 1835 and 1840. He said many things that were still very much resonant today, but 2 things he say was self-interest rightly understood. And the other thing he say is philanthropy. Philanthropy is so unique in America. The word philanthropy means to love people. And that's what Jerome has done in the best sense of the word. And we are grateful for Jerome and now the Camargo Foundation. Thank you all for being part of this discussion, and thank you for coming to our NSE. So I'm grateful to have this conversation. Can't wait to re-listen to it later. Back to you right away, Eleanor.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. That was a really great question and really great addition. We have a tradition here at the Rail of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And today I'm thrilled to welcome our Poet Laureate of the Day, Samira Negrouche, here to the stage. Samira Negrouche lives in Algiers, where she was born. She is a poet, essayist, translator, and a doctor who privileges her literary craft over the practice of medicine. Prone to multidisciplinary projects, she has frequently collaborated with visual artists and musicians. She has published multiple books of poetry and has been shortlisted for the Derek Walcott Prize for Poetry and the National Translation Award in Poetry. Thank you so much for being here with us, Samira.
Thank you for having me today. It's so wonderful to remember my time in Camargo Foundation. The place, but also the team are really something special. I will be reading 2 different works. The first one is called Sabotage on Sabotage. It echoes Ida's Boreal book, The Sabotage Manuals, and then I will read a shorter one called Anna, which is from a dialogue with Anna Moskovakis. Sabotage on Sabotage, a choir for 29 wishes. Listen, because this is the line that made you cry, listen. Everything has been sorted with your flesh. Everything has been created with your remnants. Remnants of cities and memories. Cities that are no longer centers. Cities becoming the center of the sabotage. The manual should change its perspective, should draw its peripheries as new centers. Ida, you are sometimes a sun. 29 peripheries altogether, becoming 29 breathing centers. The sabotage manual added to a breathing manual all together. And she is afraid we are living in peace. We have a problem. That's why she likes to microsleep in the afternoon. We have a problem. This afternoon and every other afternoon, we are deporting them tomorrow. Oh, Bella ciao, Bella ciao, Bella ciao, ciao, ciao. La libertà. Always complain and be difficult, a certain measure of humor above all. Let's pose the system. Let's smile to the institution. To place something in one spot is to place something war ich that isn't things she has to make. War ich red. Don't be scared. Tipicamente camina con sus armas. She walks with her weapons. La conversación disectada, her voice cut. In secreto. Shh. Susem. All in secret. Werk, werktig, to work. Other things in the toilet. Susem. Soak a sponge. Press the paper. Enter. A dirty one is receptive. Be receptive. Cool. Eat. You weren't meant to understand. Transport, well, you see. Destination not guaranteed. Waste, lose, increase, wait. Do never recalculate. Erase pictures from walls. Don't even mention a new home. Insist. Insist again. Don't get pregnant, Ursula. Insist again. Evil mother gave birth. I had been trying to give birth to myself straight into the fire. Remember to sabotage only the dominant part of yourself. I sometimes sabotage the wrong one. I don't drink coffee anymore. The act of control is ordinary. L'institution pollue. It poisons you. Yes, the institution. The price is high. Your 1 meter cube of oxygen is sabotaged. A breath sabotage in all ways, so well organized. You don't have time for the moral. Movement never lies. Move. All who are scattered and dispersed, come. Give us lemons, oil and eggs. Heaven and earth will hear us. Come. The sky is red and the circle and the triangle is full. Come. We are here, isolated from events, hands and hearts inside things. Fire will be involved, lemons, oil, and eggs. We are here when all the animals live together. And now a shorter one called Anna, translated by Marilyn Hacker. Anna, the chair was overturned. It's after the end, whatever end, that we must readjust forgetting. Paradise Anna sometimes has a taste of moldy sun. When I think of the sun, I want to think of Sénac, of Amrouche, of Amrani. But when I think sun, I want to think of the California sun, the one I've never seen, that Mother Earth that nourishes you. And desire makes its place in what perhaps will happen. It doesn't matter much if it happens. At the end, paradise puts the chair back. I'm not saying the chair stands upright again. I'm not saying that it gets up, but isn't there something that has to be put right? And I think that it's the idea of paradise itself that's bothering me. In the Quran, some remember especially the virgins offered to martyrs. There should be an end to such sacrifice, Anna. Of course, restore the virgins and the mothers. For the Marabout of Dakar, there was no point in going to Mecca, because he said Mecca is your mother's hip. Honor your mother's hip, he said. He didn't say strangle yourself with your umbilical cord, but your mother, like Mecca, is a promised land. You must go there only once. My mother's land is a joyful chord. It's a song in the bath. Tawardet. Tawardet, tawardet, يم tawardet الزهر. حيث شفاه حيث ملاح ورتنت جارة تنطهر. الزينيس ذيك فراونيس مذ العطر ثمانيس. وين يسرح عنمي يعيا هذه الطاس ذي لهنا. Tawardet, the rose. My mother remembers the bath. All children are beautiful. And paradise, Anna, is a mother in whom you travel only once. A refrain that remains like a faraway pulse. We aren't perfect, Anna. We aren't imperfect either. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much.
you.
That was really beautiful. A really, really lovely way to wrap up this wonderful dialogue. Thank you so much again to Julie, Alex, Jenny, Cassandra, and Amanda. And thanks to Juliet as well for helping out in preparation. We would also like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program to make these daily conversations possible and for supporting our archive, which you can view on our YouTube channel. For the past 22 years, the Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our monthly publication and our public events like our daily NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support us in our work. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for an exciting conversation with Helen Molesworth, Tacita Dean, Brigitte Lacombe, Catherine Opie, and Amanda Gluey-Bizzi on the event of Face-to-Face Portraits of Artists at ICP. We'll conclude tomorrow with a reading by Elena Come del Junco. And thank you all for being here and tuning in. You can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much. It's been so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
From New York
Cassandra.
to France. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
That was so wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you,
yes,
Julie.
yes, yes.
Thank you, Alex.